The interrogation room was silent, not the calm kind of silence, but the heavy, uncomfortable silence that makes every small movement sound louder than it should. A single camera blinked red in the corner of the ceiling. Across the steel table sat Daniel Mercer, a 27-year-old freelance delivery driver from a quiet suburban town. His hands rested calmly on the table, too calmly. Most suspects fidget. They tap their fingers, shift in their seats, avoid eye contact. Daniel did none of those things. Instead, he smiled. Detective Aaron Miles noticed that immediately. Miles had worked homicide investigations for nearly 18 years. He had seen anger, panic, denial, and sometimes even grief. But smiles like Daniel's, those were rare. Across from him sat Detective Rachel Novak, reviewing a thin folder. Inside were the early details of a troubling case. 3 nights earlier, a 19-year-old university student named Evan Carter had been reported missing after leaving a late-night study session. His phone signal had stopped near an abandoned industrial district on the edge of town. The only person confirmed to have seen him afterward was Daniel Mercer. Daniel had been delivering food in the area that night. According to his statement, he had seen nothing unusual. No arguments. No suspicious vehicles. Nothing. Yet investigators couldn't ignore a strange coincidence. Security cameras showed Daniel's car circling the same block 3 separate times within 15 minutes. Detective Miles leaned forward slightly. "Daniel," he said calmly, "we're just trying to understand your route that night." Daniel nodded politely. "Of course," he replied. His voice was steady, confident, almost rehearsed. "I told the officer earlier, I got lost trying to find an address." GPS issues. Rachel Novak glanced at Miles. They had heard that explanation already, twice, but there was something odd about the way Daniel spoke. He answered quickly, almost too quickly. Like someone who had practiced every line, Miles continued. "So you didn't notice anything strange in the area?" Daniel shook his head. "Nope." Then he leaned back slightly, relaxed, comfortable, but Rachel noticed something small, something subtle. Daniel never asked why he was here. Most innocent witnesses ask immediately. They want to know what happened. They want to help. Daniel did not. Instead, he seemed more interested in steering the conversation. "So, did you find the guy yet?" he asked casually. Miles paused. That was another detail. Investigators had never said a crime had occurred. Evan Carter was still technically listed as a missing person. Yet Daniel had just referred to him as the guy. Rachel flipped a page in the file. "Daniel," she said carefully, "how well did you know Evan Carter?" Daniel shrugged. "I didn't. Just saw him walking once." Miles watched his face closely. No hesitation, no stress, perfect control. But then something unexpected happened. Daniel began asking questions, lots of them. "What time did he disappear? Did anyone see him after me? Have you checked the warehouses?" Miles didn't answer. Instead, he leaned back. Because now something was becoming clear. Daniel wasn't nervous. He was probing, trying to learn what the police knew, trying to shape the conversation, trying to control the interrogation. Rachel noticed another strange detail. Daniel kept glancing briefly toward the corner of the room. Toward the camera, not nervously, almost calculating. Like he knew exactly how he appeared on video. Miles slowly closed the file. "Daniel," he said quietly, "why did your car circle the block 3 times?" For the first time, Daniel hesitated, just for half a second. But to an experienced detective, half a second can mean everything. Daniel quickly recovered. "Told you. GPS problems." Miles nodded. But something else had already caught Rachel's attention. She glanced down at Daniel's delivery log. Then back at him, because according to the timestamps, Daniel hadn't been lost. He had completed every delivery perfectly on time. Except one, a 22-minute gap, right in the middle of the same block where Evan Carter disappeared. Rachel looked up slowly. Daniel smiled again, confident, relaxed. But Miles now noticed the one detail Daniel had tried very hard to control: his breathing, slow, measured, almost practiced, like an actor performing for an audience. And that's when Detective Miles realized something unsettling. Daniel wasn't just answering questions, he was performing. And the interrogation had only just begun. The interview dragged on for another hour. And Daniel Mercer remained calm, almost unbelievably so. Detective Rachel Novak had seen suspects break down within minutes, but Daniel maintained the same controlled posture, the same relaxed tone, the same confident smile. To an inexperienced observer, he looked completely innocent. But to trained investigators, something felt deeply wrong. Daniel answered every single question quickly, too quickly. He rarely paused to think, and his answers always sounded prepared, like he had rehearsed them. Detective Miles quietly stepped out of the interrogation room. Inside the observation area, a small team of investigators watched the live feed on a monitor. An analyst was rewinding the footage. "Watch his eyes," she said, pointing to the screen. Miles leaned closer. Daniel wasn't nervous, not in the typical sense. But every time Rachel asked about the missing student, Evan Carter, his gaze would shift slightly downward. Just for a moment. These are micro-expressions, tiny, fleeting reactions that most people would never notice. But experienced interrogators live for these moments. Miles nodded slowly. "He's managing the conversation," he said. Rachel joined them just a few moments later, looking frustrated. "He keeps asking questions back at me," she added. "That's deliberate. It's a classic psychological tactic known as interrogation reversal. Instead of answering, suspects try to gather information from you, trying to figure out what you know, trying to stay one step ahead." Daniel Mercer was playing that game perfectly. But then, the forensic team delivered a new piece of information. And suddenly, the entire investigation shifted. A security camera from a nearby parking garage had captured something investigators initially overlooked. A blurry figure, walking behind Daniel's delivery car. The timestamp placed this exact moment right in the middle of Daniel's unexplained 22-minute gap. The figure looked like Evan Carter, and he was following Daniel's car, walking toward the abandoned warehouse district. A quiet tension filled the observation room. Daniel hadn't mentioned that, not once. Rachel took a deep breath and returned to the interrogation room. Daniel looked up, still smiling, still radiating confidence. "Everything good?" he asked, as if he were just catching up with an old friend. Rachel sat down calmly across from him. "Daniel, we found a camera that shows Evan walking behind your car, for the first time." Daniel's smile faded, just slightly, but it was there. A crack in his flawless performance. "Oh," he said, his voice now careful. "Really?" Rachel nodded. "Do you remember seeing him?" Daniel leaned back in his chair again, pretending to think hard. "Maybe. Yeah. Maybe I saw someone walking." Rachel noticed the difference immediately. Earlier, Daniel had sworn he saw nothing unusual at all. Now, his memory had conveniently changed. Miles re-entered the room. He placed a printed still image on the table between them. It was the blurry figure from the security camera, walking behind Daniel's car. Daniel stared at it for 3 seconds. For seconds. Much longer than he'd taken to answer any other question. Then he shrugged, trying to appear dismissive. Could be anyone. Miles watched him, his gaze intense. Then he said something completely unexpected. "We know what happened after this moment." Daniel's eyes flickered upward. Just for a brief second. And that was the exact moment Detective Miles had been waiting for. Because Daniel had just revealed something. Something subtle, yet incredibly powerful. He didn't look at Miles or Rachel. He looked toward the large city map pinned on the wall. Specifically, he glanced at the area marking the warehouse district. But the investigators had never mentioned the warehouses during the interrogation. Daniel had brought them up himself earlier, and now he had looked toward that spot again. A wave of realization washed over Rachel as she saw what Miles had seen. Daniel wasn't reacting to the evidence they had just shown him. He was reacting to what he thought the investigators knew, and that could only mean one thing. Daniel Mercer knew exactly where Evan Carter had gone. The game was over. Thanks for watching, and if you enjoyed this story, don't forget to like and subscribe for more. The courtroom was silent. Weeks had passed since the interrogation, and the investigation had uncovered a trail of evidence Daniel Mercer never expected. It began with the small details. The delivery log gap, the security camera footage. But the real breakthrough came from the interrogation itself. Detective Miles had reviewed the footage dozens of times, and one moment stood out, when Rachel mentioned the camera footage. Daniel glanced toward the warehouse district map. That single glance led investigators to search the abandoned industrial area more thoroughly. Inside one warehouse, investigators discovered something crucial. Daniel's car tire tracks, the The same pattern matched to the delivery vehicle he used that night. Nearby, they found Evan Carter's missing backpack. The discovery turned the entire case. In court, prosecutors carefully explained the timeline. Daniel had attempted to manipulate the interrogation. He asked questions to learn what investigators knew. He tried to appear calm and cooperative, but his own behavior revealed the truth. The defense argued Daniel had simply been nervous. But the prosecution presented the interrogation footage. The micro-expressions, the changing statements, the subtle glance toward the warehouse map. The jury watched carefully, and after several hours of deliberation, they returned with their decision: guilty, not because of a confession, but because Daniel Mercer underestimated one thing. Experienced detectives notice what others miss: the smallest hesitation, the smallest glance, the smallest mistake. Detective Miles later reflected on the case during a training seminar. People think interrogations are about forcing confessions, he explained. But the truth is simpler. Most cases are solved because someone tries too hard to control the story. In Daniel's case, the performance became the evidence, and the smallest crack in his act revealed everything. But investigators know something unsettling. This case wasn't unique. Manipulation inside interrogation rooms happens more often than people realize. And sometimes, the truth only appears when someone slips for just a second. If you thought this case was shocking, the next story is even more unexpected. This case wasn't unique. The next one used the same loophole, and it ended much worse. Subscribe so you don't miss it.